Good evening and wishing you all a very pleasant afternoon. A hearty welcome to Commander Raja Narayanaswamy, Mr. Suresh Registrar, and our Dean, Johnson Matthew. Commander Raja, a little welcome note for you, uh, a little write-up which you had sent. I'm just taking the liberty to read it out, so my viewers are they're aware. Commander Raja is a retired commander from the Indian Navy, over 20 years of service. He is an electrical and electronics engineer who has spent over 12 years of his naval career sailing onboard ships, missile coverts, destroyers, frigates, tankers, working on state-of-art technologies such as weapon systems, missiles, gunnery equipment, communication and electronic warfare systems, radars, sonars, and the list is endless. He has an MTech in Radar and Communication Systems from IIT Delhi and holds a postgraduate diploma in management studies. He is also an alumnus of IIM Indore. He has been a part of strategic projects engaging with DRDO, like the Indian Nuclear Submarine Program, while in the Navy. He has also participated in key naval operations, Kargil conflict, and Operation Parakram. He has been a proud recipient of the Commander in Chief Award for the Professional Excellence and a commendation by the Chief of Naval Staff. For the last 5 years, after hanging up his uniform, he has been with Amazon in the e-commerce sector and an exciting artificial intelligence and machine language domain where he is supporting Alexa. I'm sure all the students know about Alexa. Currently, he heads a team in Chennai that helps Alexa become smarter by the day. Apart from his professional interest, he is also passionate about training, teaching, and interacting with youth. He frequently interacts with students of IIM and other B schools. So we are very fortunate to have you with us, Commander Raja, interacting with our students, not from B schools, but the international schools. Today, he's here to ignite our minds on what the future of work and careers our students should look forward to in this volatile world. Welcome, Commander Raja, again, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Radha ma'am, for setting that context and that introduction. Let me try and figure this out and let me know if you can see my screen and we can get started. Yeah. So thank you so much, like I said, for the warm introduction. And I really, only when somebody reads it out like that do you realize that one has traveled that journey. Always a pleasure to interact with young students and parents. And this is my first FB live. So these are difficult times. And given the fact that we are in the middle of a pandemic and there is so much of uncertainty prevailing, when you requested me to talk to the students, one thing that came to my mind was, there are the lessons that the uniform has taught me, and there are leadership lessons that one's picked up along the way. But what I wanted to focus was that 5 to 6 years from now, these students are going to, step into the real world and they're going to be in the world of work. So, what are the kind of changes that they expect to see? What is the world of work like currently? What is it that they should be, prepared for? Those are some of the things that I wanted to speak about, and I will try and correlate what I have learned in the armed forces with what is it that they need to imbibe in terms of skills. Hopefully, good enough to influence, impress, and inspire them. Right? Awesome. So let's just get started with this. So I'll just start off by saying that for the students, I'm sure they know the big five tech companies: Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and Facebook. They weren't even around 15 to 20 years back, at least not in the form that we know them that they are. So therefore, what worked for my generation and perhaps most of the parents' generations, that we went ahead, studied something in college, picked up a degree, picked up a job and worked end to end through our, professional careers, that is not going to be, working for them. It's not going to be a copy paste model whatsoever, and which is where, this whole talk gets its perspective from. Uh, Before I move ahead, I always do this in all of my talks. I want to spend a moment of remembrance for our soldiers who give up there today for our tomorrow. We don't often give them enough credit for the kind of work that they do. Today happens to be, Navy Day. So my best wishes to all of the audience for a very very happy Navy Day. This is a very special day for me personally, and like I said, the armed forces are there doing so much for us, and yet they don't feature in our consciousness. They are at the borders, they are fighting counterterrorism, there is internal security, aid to civil power, industrial security, we call them in riots, natural disasters, pulling kids out of bore wells, you name it. And this is one organization that will never fail. You will see the law and order police fail, you will see the civil administration give up, you will never see the armed forces ever give up. So this is something that they manage to do 100% right every time, time and again. And some of the lessons about how they do it is very, very interesting. And I want to talk to you about some of that, right? So I want to start off by introducing this acronym called VUCA, VUCA. I'm not sure if you heard of it before. It stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So each of those words pretty much summarize what the world is going to be like now and in the near future, right? Like I said, what worked in the past is not going to work in the future. Trust me when I say this, students, that the skills or the jobs that you are going to be working on, 10 years from now, possibly haven't been invented yet. So it is futile to, think in terms of, hey, I want to do this degree and I want to learn or pick up this degree from this college, and then I will do that, because you really don't know what's going to be the future and what are the kind of skills you will be required to display. So the key to the future is not in accumulating degrees, but in accumulating skills and abilities. We'll talk a little more about it going forward. The speed of technology and change which you see around you is so much that you will have to unskill, reskill, unlearn, relearn multiple times in your career. By the time you pick up a skill, few years down the line, you will see that particular skill is obsolete. There are probably machines doing it better, or there is something else which has come, which is version 2.0. So unlike a lot of us who did some engineering degree 20 years back, and we are still sort of calling it as an achievement, you people will be required to keep picking up new skills along the way, and that is fundamentally the difference between how we operated and how you are going to operate. The school books that you read and study, they will tell you what happened in the past. So there is a historical perspective that they will give you. They will tell you what is right and what is wrong, which is very obvious, because if something is right and something is wrong, I can get a computer to choose it. So anything that can automate between the obvious will be automated. So your ability as bright students and professionals going forward is not to be making choices between the right and the wrong, which is obviously going to be done by machines. You will be required to choose between two rights or possibly two wrongs, and try and operate in the gray zone, as it were. Now this is the challenge, and your ability to think on your feet and do this is what will differentiate your success levels. Think about it. The COVID and this entire pandemic that you see around you, this is another manifestation of this VUCA world that I spoke to you about. We don't know whether there is a cure, the vaccine is on its way, infections are rising, we can't decide whether to go for livelihood choices or social isolation choices, so on and so forth. But I want to tell you that in the history of mankind, there have been several such phases. Before the COVID was something called as the information revolution, where the IT boom took place. Before that, there were the world wars. Before that, there was the industrial revolution. So mankind through history has overcome a lot of these paradigm shifts, as it were, and conquered it. Why COVID is so big? Because one, it is happening in our lifetimes. The rest of it you read as history, but this is really happening in our lifetimes. And therefore, it is important for us to be able to frame responses to this, right? So in every crisis, as they say, lies an opportunity. And I want to draw your attention to what changes will come in the world of work as a result of this volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So one example that I often like to use is, conventionally life, we have said life is a game of chess, and we have to plan ahead, and so many moves ahead you have to think, so on and so forth. Now, a computer can play chess today. So even if it is difficult in terms of the number of permutations and combinations that you can think ahead, it is mathematically doable, and therefore you see computers playing chess. And the moment you see computers playing chess, it means it is something that can be programmed and automated. Think of life not like a game of chess, but like a game of snooker, where if I have a person hitting a ball, the way that ball is going to go and impact the different other balls and how the whole board is going to look like, even the player who's doing it the first time cannot repeat it. That is VUCA world for you, right? And that is a challenge that you need to be ready for. So what I have done is I've broken down the future of work in a VUCA world into 4 distinct patterns. The first is, of course, about automation. So there is this whole talk about machines taking over the planet, automation, artificial intelligence, robotics, transforming businesses and lives. We are talking in terms of driverless cars, machines which can do diagnosis for you after looking at an X-ray or a CT scan. You don't require live doctors anymore. Bots talking to customers online. So when you pick up a phone and call up a customer care, you don't know whether there's a human at the other end or there's a bot at the other end. All of these are very, very powerful, manifestations of automation. Now, think about how many jobs went out of fashion in the last few years because of automation. Most of you have been born in the ATM generation. So ask your parents how drawing cash was possible when ATMs weren't around. So when I remember when I was a youngster, I used to go to the bank, fill up a form, give it to the teller. He would give me a token. I would sit and wait for 15 minutes for my turn to come, then go to that counter, and that lady would ask me whether you want 50s, 100s, 20s, whatever. And the whole process of drawing my own money from my bank account used to take 20 to 25 minutes. And think of how it has changed over the years and how many people down the chain have lost their jobs and automation has taken over. Think of photography, which is another thing that is closer to you. Right now, you pick up your phone, aim and shoot, and you have a picture and you can edit it with the multiple apps that you see around you. Just a few years back, we had a lot of analog cameras, and we used to have these films. Your parents will be able to tell you more about how difficult photography was in the good old days. So the truth is, some jobs will be lost, make no mistake. Wherever computers and robots can come in and take over, they will take over, and some jobs will be lost. There will be some new ones which will be created as a result of this automation. And some of them would be relating to these new technologies. So think of something like a robo mediator or a drone controller or some such, a thing where you have to engage with these devices. So you could have something like a robo interpreter. So in a factory, as you see in this image, you will have robots and bots and humans sitting next to each other and working. That's the future for you. Jobs which are related to employing these new technologies, like I said, will grow. Healthcare, education, entertainment, infrastructure, creative professions will flourish. So you cannot have, computers and robots create music for you, create poems for you or literature for you. That of course they will do, but eventually in the future. But creative professions will thrive. And those are the jobs that you must seek out and target, right? The next trend that I foresee is something that I call sharing economy. Now, you think of Ola, you think of Uber. Do these guys own cars? Answer is no. Do these guys hire drivers? Answer is no. What do they own? All they own is that one technology platform, which is that app. And using that app, they are able to bring people together, the customer, the driver, and the resource, which is the vehicle. And they are creating value by connecting these 3 people. Think about many others: OLX, Airbnb, Facebook, Twitter. Everything is about value creation by interconnectivity. So the internet or technology has played this big leveling field where you're connecting resources to the demand and supply, right? You could be in Chennai, you could be working for a firm based out of UK or the US. Working from home, online classes. My wife is a yoga instructor. She takes classes for students in Germany. Was this even possible a few years back? Right? So major companies have shown that it is possible now to work without the confines or comfort levels of an office, right? And they can work from home. That is the future. What is also the future is they will see no merit in employing full-time people, giving them a salary, keeping them for 30 days, and tasking them for 20 days. That's going to go away. What you're going to see is specialized teams, independent workers, contract labor, where somebody wants to build a PPT, he will go onto a site and see who's the best person who makes PPTs for them and pay them for that particular assignment. And there are already a lot of such sites which do this. So what you need to be prepared for is the skill level. Just because you come from an IIT or an IIM or a XYZ college or school will not guarantee you that success which your skill and adaptability will, right? Okay, this is something that's not very obvious, but I want you to think about it a little bit. What the internet and technology has done is it has created the concept of personalizing an experience, which means every customer wants to get things done or made the way he or she wants it so that they feel unique. Now, have you gone into that Lenskart website where you are allowed to, flash your phone camera at your face and you can try out various, shades or frames sequentially to see how it fits your face? There are certain furniture websites where you can go and, see how a particular sofa or a bed looks in your living room or your bedroom. So artificial intelligence and augmented reality can make it possible for you to create these, personalized experiences. Think about the way you watch TV. Gone are the days where you used to have Sunday 9:30 in the morning. I used to have a Ramayana episode. Now you can watch Ramayana whenever you want. You have Netflix, you have Amazon. They tell you, hey, you like this movie, you perhaps would like this, this, and this. They are able to churn out suggestions based on your liking, your previous purchases. So with Amazon as well. Google tracks your interest depending upon the time you spend in a particular thread or a website, and it will tell you more such stuff. Ditto Facebook, right? So information that you share or you consume is used to customize and personalize for you, right? Fashion, e-commerce, gadgets, technology. Gone are the days where you could say, hey, I have these two models, pick up one of them and we should be good. That's not going to happen anymore. So all the careers which possibly contribute to creating this personalized experience will flourish. Let me give you an example. Analytics. There is a lot of data which is analyzed basically about how you engage with a web page. How many clicks do you do? Where do you click? How much time do you spend on a particular page? Data analytics, which drives decision making and marketing. That's where the jobs are. Search engine optimization to give you the best results based on your previous history. Behavioral economics to try and push you to buy some things based on what you like in the past. Personalized hospitality services, where you want a certain kind of a pillow or a certain chair with a certain angle, people will do it for you for a price. So anything that is creating that personalized experience is going to be there in the future. You've already seen signs of it coming. Alexa today can sense emotions and moods. It will know when you're angry, when you're smiling, when you're upset, and it can play music depending on your mood. Hike is an app which can create personalized avatars of yours so that you can create your own emojis. I believe Insta also has something like this. I'm tech challenged, so I wouldn't know. So those are the things that you really look forward to. And this perhaps is the fourth and most important trend that you will see, which is the greening of the planet. So anything to do with sustainable development, green economy, making the planet cleaner, lesser polluted, water, conservation, soil conservation, all jobs which will help towards solving climate crisis, biodiversity crisis. These are what are going to be there in the future. So for all of you who are thinking, hey, I'm going to clear this entrance exam, I'm going to get into engineering and then figure out 4 years from now what I'm going to do, I have bad news for you, because the world is no longer the same. You need to be able to not just acquire that degree, but pick up finite skills, assess what you know, what you're good at, what is it that you're passionate about, and what is it that you like, and then align your choices along with your abilities so that you are able to climb the ladder of success, right? With this background, I'm going to, change tack a little bit and talk about VUCA once again. And I told you about the armed forces, how they are able to successfully operate. Now, for any armed forces operation to be successful, as indeed for any of you students, say you're preparing for exams or putting an event together, super important is planning. So even for this particular, Ignited Mind series, I'm sure there is a lot of planning that's gone in. There is somebody who's coordinating the IT stuff. There is somebody who's coordinating the, guest list, so on and so forth. But trust me, in the VUCA world, things would go wrong, and you would be, confronted with surprise and intrigue about how much things could go wrong, right? And this is true of the armed forces more than anybody else. Think of 26/11. I'm sure you've heard of this 26/11 attacks, where you had a bunch of terrorists entering, Taj, Oberoi, and all of the other places in Bombay with hand grenades, assault rifles, IEDs, and they were able to, take over the hotels before the NSG, the army, could come in. Now, you will appreciate that the army was brought in from Delhi. They were not sitting in Bombay, and they did not have any of the, drawings of the layouts of Taj, Oberoi, or anything. But all credit to them, they were able to assess the information. They didn't even know how many terrorists were. Initially, the numbers were all speculative, but they were able to fight the, terrorists, bring them down, and no collateral damage. So once the NSG came in, there was not one civilian casualty. How does this happen? How is it that, in the last moment, the army is given some information and they're able to operate and successfully, meet the mission? Few things. Focus on training, preparation, drills, practice. That's the key. And the same set of rules, I think, applies for your exam preparation as well. So you have a syllabus, you have a textbook. It's not just enough to, memorize and rote and reproduce something, but the ability lies in the moment you get an exam paper, suppose a maths paper, which tests your intelligence beyond that textbook. It allows you to, exercise your gray cells a little more and try and stretch your ability. Only some of you are able to sort of stretch themselves. Those are the people who are able to apply the skills, who will be successful in the real world. Real world is not about, hey, I read 2 into 2 is 4, I'm going to apply that. That machines can do for you, right? The other bit is, and I want you to understand this, is a lot of people plan everything to, the last bit. They want to have a plan B and plan C. So I want to tell you that the best laid plans don't survive first contact with the enemy. It's like you preparing for a maths exam, coming in to write the paper, and you realize, oh hell, my teacher has given me something. 3 questions out of the 10 are, slightly out of syllabus, not fully, and they want me to, exercise my thinking, and you're completely confused if you've not really exercised for it. So the key is for you to be able to think on your feet, adapt, and apply your knowledge, right? How does this happen? In the army, we always operate as a team, and every team member should know his responsibility, what he or she is supposed to do. If the leader is there, not there, supervising, not supervising, they know what is the ultimate objective and what needs to be done and what is their individual role in doing it, right? And you relentlessly have practiced yourself so much that when the opportunity presents itself, you're able to sort of deliver that, right? So this is the success story, or this is the secret of the success of the armed forces. And I'm going to jump straight to the third and final part of my presentation, which is about 8 lessons that I have learned in the armed forces. Most of them are extremely, extremely commonsensical, but very, very interesting nevertheless. I was the first one in my family to join the armed forces. Never before had anybody even ventured into that territory. I was a family of bankers and government servants, and you know, and looking back in the 20 years that I served in the Navy, I worked and lived in across 10 to 12 different cities in the country. And that's my first lesson to you guys. Without guts, there is no glory. You only live once. There will be enough and more people to tell you that, hey, stay in that comfort zone. Don't leave this city. Don't leave home. Don't leave this country. Don't try this something new. Stick to what is already tested and tried. And I want to tell you that that is the sure shot, criteria to be mediocre and not sort of raise the bar in terms of achieving success. Whether it is a city, whether it's family, whether it's a new language or a new geography, you will realize the moment you step out of your comfort zone, magic happens because you discover an entire world which is, there to try you out, challenge you. And I can tell you this from experience that what I did not learn, years of staying at home, 6 months into a hostel, changed me. And it taught me life skills that I continue to have for life. You need to fly solo, people. You will have friends, you'll have families, you'll have teachers, they're there to support you, guide you. But ultimately, this is your life and your journey. There will be opportunities and they will present themselves at a time and place which is not of your choosing. You will get a fantastic college, but it will be in Guwahati. You'll get a great job, it will be in Chhattisgarh. You should be able to grab that opportunity as against some of the others who are saying, hey, I don't want to leave Chennai. I love my curd rice too much to leave Chennai. Nothing against Chennai, but I'm just saying that as a factor. So that's the key. Your ability to take those hard calls upon yourself and jump to take those opportunities. Look around. Anybody you consider a role model or anybody you think has achieved heights of success, they are all people who took a chance, who put a bet on themselves, took some risk, and jumped into uncertainty. You never ever become great by becoming part of a crowd. Trust me on this. Can you think of any leader, any great role model who was part of a crowd? Answer is no. They were people who created a crowd that followed them. That is the fundamental difference. Related point. I told you that a lot of us are obsessed with planning our lives to the last, dotting the last I and crossing the last T. I joined the Naval Academy way back in July 1991. I don't know, most of you weren't even born at that point of time. And I had come through pretty much the same assembly line. I had gone for IIT classes, which I'm sure a lot of you are currently involved in going. I realized 3 months into the course IIT classes that I was not cut out for that, which I'm sure a lot of you would have already discovered. Like a lot of you, you haven't tried, but I didn't make it to IIT at the first time. And just to prove a point that I was different, and in my own head, perhaps the only next honorable thing than being an IITian was to try and join the uniformed service, which is why I landed up in the Navy. And it was a pure chance. I didn't know anything about the Navy. I just went and cleared the exam and I got it. It was only after I went for the interview there when I discovered that this was a career which a lot of youngsters actually coveted and they really prepared for, whether it is Sainik school guys, military school guys, families of armed forces people. I realized that, oh, what I have got into by chance is something that a lot of people would give their arm for. And that's when I started sort of valuing what I had. So here's my life lesson number 2 to you. You will start your life journeys as assembly line products. You are as good or as bad as your classmates or the person sitting next to you. In your future, out of a group of 100 people, 70 of you will be in the middle. This is law of nature. 10 or 15 of you will see dizzying heights of success, and there will be 5 or 6 of you who will really struggle. This is nothing to do with your individual abilities. This is the law of nature, right? The key for you to be able to move to the next level is to break the clutter and pick up those opportunities and embrace the uncertainties. Everything cannot be planned to the last bit. In my own case, I eventually did go to an IIT, not the first time, but maybe 10 years down the line, where I went for my MTech. Not only did I go to an IIT, I went to an IIM also. So life has this beautiful way of, uh, rewarding you or gifting you for all the chances that you take. You may miss some, you may win some, right? Trust me, success is not drawn on an Excel sheet. If a success was drawn on an Excel sheet, all our chartered accountants and finance guys would be, superstars today, which they are not. So that's where it is, right? Was third, the military training that I underwent at the academy. I was an overweight schoolboy. Yeah. I was overweight. I was oversmart. I was cocky. I was oversized. 3 years at the academy put me through such physical stress that 6 months into that training, I was able to run 12 kilometers with ease. In my second semester, I was running 24 kilometers with that pack and rifle and everything. Everything that I believed that I could never achieve physically, I was able to do. I never learned how to swim. Chennai, there was no drinking water, forget swimming. I learned how to swim. Not only did I learn to swim, we did abandoned ship drills where we used to jump from the ship and swim in the sea and, get to the nearest boat as part of our exercises. What this physical stress does to you is to give you the sense of confidence that when life presents such challenges in the future, you tell yourself, hey, I've done this before. I've seen worse stress than this. I can do this again. So when I was posted on a missile boat and the ship was rolling and pitching in the monsoon seas and everybody was seasick and vomiting, you feel like, why am I even here? Did I sign up for this? When you want to give up, that is a time that muscle memory tells you that, dude, you've done stuff which is worse than this, so you can endure this. And that's my advice to you, that the more you sweat in peace, the less you will bleed in war. You need to be able to set exacting standards for yourself, physically, mentally, emotionally, and it is a habit. So when the opportunity presents itself, you are able to deliver your best. And it doesn't start with something very big. Yeah, all of us have 24 days, 24 hours in a day, I'm sorry. So if you clean your room, if you're playing a game, if you're doing your assignment, if you're able to give it your best shot every time and make it a habit, that's a great start. There are enough and more guys who will tell you, hey, chill, yaar, it's okay to under deliver. Trust me, nobody became great by under delivering. So make this habit of giving your 100% to everything you do a habit, and that is what will take you places, right? When we were sea cadets on board ships, we are taught how to operate the ship, and we were part of the crew. So we used to scrub the decks, we used to paint the floors, we used to do maintenance routines on equipment, we learned how to navigate the ship, we used to operate boats at sea, we used to exercise with other navies. Everybody used to kick us around here as cadets, and we were called what we lowest forms of marine life, amoeba. We were the amoebas of the navy, who had no clue of what was happening. And when you finish that training, you realize that you knew inside out of what was there to be learned. So tomorrow, when you all become leaders and you go ahead and lead organizations and become part of bigger teams, you will understand that there is no shortcut to learning your job than rolling up your sleeves, learning getting your hands dirty. And you will see this even in school. There are some of you who look at YouTube videos and, this is okay, we're learning. And there are some of you who actually practice this very, very hard, the same problem, they would work out. The fundamental difference between the two is there for everybody to see, right? So the key for you is to understand how something is to be done. And I'll give you an example. Most of us have domestic helps in our house. Your moms and your dads, they use them for various household chores. Your mom exactly knows, how much time will it take for, cleaning up, say, 30 vessels, or how much time does it take for cleaning up a couple of rooms. Why? Because she's done it herself at some stage. So unless you do it yourself, you will not be able to, guide the teams to how to do it correctly. Second, you don't know what it entails.
So you must be prepared to sweat out, roll your sleeves, get your hands dirty, do it yourself before you can tell others to do it. That is the only way to success. Okay, this is very, very obvious. You're, in the armed forces, we are, taking people into combat, we are fighting wars, and it's always the team that's first. You never operate in isolation. How do you take people? If I were to tell you that I will give you, say, 50 lakhs or 30 lakhs or 1 crore, but there is a 50% chance that you won't come back alive, how many of you are willing to take that job? I'm sure you will say, oh, no, I would rather sit with lesser amount of money. It's not about the money. It's about, a lot of people go into harm's way knowingly for the sheer pride of it. And there are leaders who are able to inspire them to that level of performance. All of you are going to be leaders in future who are going to be taking people to do things that they never thought was possible. And this is the mantra. In the armed forces, we call it the Shetwood motto. The country always comes first. Your team always comes second. Your own personal comfort always comes last. And this is not just about the armed forces. Think about your school, your principal, your teachers. The staff will always think about the school first. The faculty, the students next, and then about their own welfare last. If you follow this hierarchy and you keep the greater good and that of the team first, you will always be making sure that you make great friends. Your FB, your Insta friends are not who will stand with you when you are in trouble. You form such relationships in adversity in the armed forces who will really stay with you when you're in trouble, and you can pick up a phone and talk to them in the middle of the night and they will be there to help. Those are the relationships that you must treasure. It's okay to have, 1 or 2 of that kind. There is no need to have 1,200 FB friends who you don't even look at in real life. So identify those diamonds who will be there for you and cherish them and nurture them, people. Right? Situational awareness. In the army, we call it the lay of the land. So when you have a navigator, he will look at the wind and he will tell you, okay, the ship will drift 2 degrees to the starboard side, and he will make a correction. A sonar operator at sea will listen to the sound of the sea and tell you, hey, this is an Alpha class submarine operating at 14 knots. His understanding of his playground is so good that he is able to demonstrate his best. A lot of you don't even read newspapers, and I'm saying this in general. All of us in the present generation have become so inward looking. We don't know what's happening in the society. We don't know what's happening in politics, other than possibly Bollywood and cricket. There is nothing that sort of interests us around us. So the key is for you to be invested in stuff that's beyond you, so that you are able to have informed opinions about things around you. This is what I call situational awareness. Once you have that, you will be able to make informed decisions. Otherwise, you're constantly looking at the other people. Hey, what's happening? What's happening? And third is know what you're good at and sharpen your axe for that opportunity. Nobody ever became great by focusing on their weaknesses. Your teacher will keep telling you people that, hey, you need to improve in social studies. But if you are great at maths, social studies can be okay with a 60%. Focus on that maths, because that maths will take you to great places. It's good to work on your weaknesses, but what will take you to dizzying heights of success is what you're good at. A Dhoni became great because he invested in the helicopter shot. He did not try to become a Sachin Tendulkar or a Rahul Dravid, which is not his style. So understand what is it that you're good at and back it to the hilt. I'm not saying you underperform. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying if you're not good at English, don't work on it. That's not what I'm saying. You need to get it to a level where it's functional. But clearly, if you're better at geography or maths, that is what you should be invested in to take you to better heights of success, right? The last bit which I have is something called Aaj Jang Hogi, which means today there will be war. Start every day thinking, today is going to be the day where I will be required to demonstrate my excellence. In the army, you have this written outside every accommodation block. So when you step out, you look at this and you say, okay, I'm smart today. I have dressed up well. I'm ready for the opportunity which comes. That is the attitude, alertness, which will take you places. Little things matter. The big things will take care of themselves. So whether it is in the way of how you arrange uniform, how you keep your boots, how you keep your sports shoes, where you keep your bag at home, the small things, the attention to detail is what will differentiate you from the rest of the gang. Trust me, the big things take care of themselves, right? You need to be invested in the way you are dressing. Pay attention to the detail of personal grooming, etiquette, whether you like it or not. This is the generation where people judge you in 30 seconds. I take interviews all the time of candidates, and within the first 5 to 7 minutes, I have already decided in my head whether this candidate is good or bad. And then I'm only sort of adjusting my state. So, first impression that you make has to be good. Not all of us are Abdul Kalams that we can come with any kind of hairstyle with not an attention to dress, and yet we are what we are. So none of us is as gifted as that great man. So we are all average people. So pay that. I'm not saying you wear expensive stuff. That's not the key. If you're wearing shoes, make sure they are polished. If you wear a shirt, make sure it's ironed properly. That will, show your attention to detail. The other thing is pick up physical activity of some kind. Stay fit. Your physical ability, your ability to play a game, go for a run, swim, gym, it will make you feel better about yourself. The more you feel nice about your body, the way you look, the way you dress, it will give a boost to your confidence. Last point on this one, 80% of your success is defined by your ability to communicate well. You could speak in Hindi, you could speak in Tamil, you could speak in English, but understand the art of conveying your ideas to people in a very, very crisp, firm, and comprehensive form. And that you will see is a game changer, right? I'm not sure if you get this in any books. Last, I've come to the end of this. Character and morals, right? This is something that probably we are used to seeing a lot, and we use this very, very cliched. But the armed forces of India are not just known for doing things right, they are known for doing the right things. It will mean more effort, more hardships, the harder right than the easier wrong. I want to tell you a story. So when Kargil war ended in 1999, Pakistan refused to accept dead bodies of their soldiers. It was the Indian army which cremated them with full military honors, one soldier to another. They were enemies. They killed our guys, but we gave them that respect. That is character for you. Fearlessly doing the right thing, and it will give you confidence and courage that you're doing the right thing. Not only that, we recommended Pakistani armed forces officers for gallantry awards. We said, hey, this Captain Sher Khan, this guy fought very bravely for his country. Give him the Nishane-e-Haider or whatever is that award which they have, on the basis of Indian Army's recommendation. That is professionalism for you. That is honor for you. So as you grow in your professional careers, some of you will realize that there are choices to be made. There is a shortcut which will be perhaps easier in the short term. You will see a lot of people taking it, but the ability to do the right thing, lead with integrity, serve with honor, that belief that you are on the right side and you are doing the right thing, that can move mountains for you, right? So that was lesson number 8. I'm going to just summarize this. No guts, no glory, no legend, no story. Embrace the unknown. Take risks. Train hard. More you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. What is the 4th one? Team first? Yeah. Okay, team first was the other one. Keep your wits about. Situational awareness. Small things. Attention to detail. And finally, character. Super. I have come to the end of my presentation. This is what I wanted to share with you guys. I hope this has been useful to you, right? Some of it you may or may not appreciate. Some of it Probably your parents will be able to appreciate better and explain it to you. But this is something that I have imbibed over the last 25 years in my career, right? Super. That brings me to the end of my presentation, folks. 45 minutes. This is who I am. This is where I am. You can reach out to me. I'm happy to help and respond. Thank you, Radha ma'am. Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity. I'm going to pause.
Thank you, Commander Raja. I think our students will have a lot of questions. I request the students to put up the questions in the chat box. In the meantime, thank you for a wonderful session. I'm sure all of them will apply the 8 rules which you have said, life rules which you have been following in the Indian Navy and in your current lifestyle too. I would like to little, summarize the 4 VUCA world things which you talked about: automation, sharing economy, personalization, and greening the earth. I think I got them right. Just to summarize for the kids. So students, any questions? He's here to take up our questions. Please type it in the chat box so that sir can answer them for you. In the meantime, the teachers can ask and request everybody to switch on your camera. It's like talking to a blackboard. Students?
Just give me a second.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so there are no questions.
No, there are questions. I think it's our typing.
Or if they can ask me, they can just switch on their mics and they can ask me. That's also fine.
Yes. Yes. Vijay, that's possible, right? Because he would have muted the student's mic. That's why. Vijay, that's possible, right? The students can unmute their mics and ask questions.
Yes, they can.
Yeah, please.
Or you can just let me know which
unmute and ask
student it is.
questions one by one, please. Sri Charan, you can ask a question instead of typing.
Can ask me easy ones, folks.
Yeah. They are going to.
I don't have a list of important questions. And
Yeah, no.
question
Even we don't
guide.
have a list of important questions. It's only given for exams.
Oh, okay.
Just for revision purposes. Important questions means the most asked questions.
Yeah.
But now, now that is not the case. Now they're all application oriented instead of just rote memory. Like you said, we focus more on the skill and the abilities than on the text and the content.
Critical thinking.
Yes. Like in your little intro, you're talking about submarine that you worked on the
Sonar program, yeah. For the
sonar program. So if you could just talk about a little on the sonar program, what exactly did what is that sonar program that you worked about?
Okay. No, thanks for asking that question. And so basically, submarine, is a platform that operates underwater, and the USP of a submarine is its ability to operate undetected underwater in stealth conditions. So clearly, when a submarine is acting underwater, the eyes and ears of a submarine are something called as a sonar. So basically what is done is, sonar is an acronym that stands for sound, navigation, and ranging. So what it essentially does is, it pumps out sound waves into the ocean, and depending on if there is an object which the sound waves go and hit and come back, it can pick up, depending on the duration which the sound wave took to go hit the object and come back, it will be able to say if there is a ship in another direction, how far it is. So basically, just like a bat, a bat is flying and it's transmitting sound waves to make sense of what is happening around you. The sonar is an equipment which transmits sound waves in the water in order to guide the submarine if there are navigational hazards, if there are adversaries around. So as part of, India has the unique distinction of having this big indigenous program for nuclear submarines. So when the first nuclear submarine was being built, uh, a lot of sensors for that came from abroad, but luckily for us, we have the capability to make underwater sensors within the country, and DRDO is a Defense Research and Development Organization. They have managed to indigenize that technology. So I was part of the design team for that sonar. So I was working out of Cochin in a DRDO lab, and we were working with Bharat Electronics, L&T. We designed that equipment.
Okay.
We got it manufactured at Bharat Electronics, installed it on the nuclear submarine, and then tested it. So yeah, I was part of that core design team, and it's a fantastic, opportunity to
Must
be
be
part
very
of
close to
something.
your heart.
Yeah,
Yes, you-
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay,
must
so
be close to
I
your heart.
have
You were there in the designing team.
yes. So
Yes.
what is my first feeling while attending my interview for the Indian Army? Okay, I attended for the Navy, but I get your question. So honestly, well, like I said, I mean, I was not one of those kids who was super passionate. I didn't even know. It was not like I want to join the army and I want to serve my country. None of that was there. I was the average 10, 12 standard kid who was only concentrating on how many sentems I should get, and those were the days where you either became an engineer or a doctor. There was nothing, no third option. So, like I said, I was too busy in doing all of that. It was only when I discovered my parents put me, there was a brilliant tutorial for IIT coaching that my parents put me into. And 3 months into that course, I realized that, boss, I may have the intelligence to do this, but I don't have the, ability to work 2 years continuously for this. So I discovered early on in that life cycle of IIT coaching that this is not for me. And therefore, like I told you during my talk, that the next best thing that I could make my parents proud of is to try and do something different like this. Because at that point of time in engineering, in any college less than IIT was not even considered. And I didn't want to go to the doctor side because I didn't have a passion for that. So that's where it is. So I landed up there, and because I came from a big city, I could speak well. I was generally aware of what was happening around me. I was able to crack that interview, and even today, honestly, when I look back, it looks like magic to me, and that's the point I was trying to make. That certain things in life just fall into your lap, but it is serendipity. But you can't plan everything. But now that I have that opportunity, I decided to make the full use of it. Which battles have I fought for India? Okay, very interesting. So I've been part of the Kargil conflict. Of course, the Navy had a very limited role to play in the Kargil conflict because we were deployed off the western coast, and while the action was happening in J&K Kargil, our job was to cordon off the western sector so that Pakistan's economic blockade was there. So I was at that point of time posted in Jamnagar, where doing watches to check if any air attacks are coming from Karachi, so on and so forth. That was one battle. The other one was what we call Ops Parakram. Ops Parakram was after the Parliament attack, where we had this huge deployment, where we almost went to war with Pakistan, very close to getting to war with Pakistan. That was the time that we operated on the western border, close to, ahead of Gujarat, Sir Creek, and before just short of Pakistan. So yeah, those and many more, many more conflicts and small situations that you may not have heard of because they're not as publicized. But all in all, very interesting times.
I have one question with me. Does Alexa have these privacy issues? Like you say it responds. So does it keep listening to our conversations? How is it? Like
thank you, Radha ma'am, for asking this question because I want to set the record. So there are two parts to this. I will come to Alexa in a bit, but before that, you see, why is it that any product like an Alexa, or for that matter, Google Maps, or any app that you use, why is it that you use it? There is a certain convenience that you are looking for it. Tomorrow, if you say download an app called Torchlight, it will ask you access to contacts, messages. We don't bat an eyelid. We just say okay, and we install it. So understand, like I spoke during the talk, that there is data, there is information you share, and that information is used to provide you a certain feature or a certain convenience. Google Maps today guides you from place A to place B where you want to go. but it also means it is tracking you every second of the way as to where you are. It knows where you are.
Correct.
Every day, if you travel from place A to place B, in your case, if you travel from home to school, 1 week Google will know this is your home, this is your school, this time you are at home, this time you are at school. It will also tell you, if you visit a shop, it will tell you, hey, you visited this shop, how was the experience?
Yes.
You don't think of it as privacy intrusion. You think of it as a convenience,
Correct.
right? But the fact of the matter is there is information being shared.
Yes.
There is information that's being analyzed by somebody.
Mhm.
Now, Alexa specifically, you signed up for a convenience. You're asking Alexa a question. That's a cylindrical box. Now, how will any box like that work? You ask a question to it, it converts it into a, what we call automatic speech recognition. It converts it into a text format. It sends it to a cloud. It analyzes that string of yours, what we call natural language understanding, and it converts the response back into speech and it tells you. So clearly there is data stream traveling from you to the device to the cloud and coming. And unless we have access to that information, suppose there are 3 people in your house, unless I'm able to recognize those 3 voices, how will I be able to provide that customized service to you? Because we want to bring Alexa to a level where you ask it to play music, it will play your choice of music. If your student asks it to play music, it will play. So we want to bring in a lot of customization and personalization. For that to happen, there is a certain information that needs to be shared. But to answer your specific question, no, we don't. It's not like somebody is keeping on listening to you in your bedroom, what you're talking. The moment you say Alexa, that's when it wakes up.
Okay.
There is a wake word that is there. So you say Alexa, or you say Amazon, or you say computer, it will wake up, and then you say whatever you have to ask.
Okay. Now, only in these apps and products, there are some of these terms and conditions. Only if we accept them, they say yes. Okay. Otherwise, we are not able to,
So Alexa gives you an opportunity. You have a setting in Alexa where you can go and you can just say, Alexa, forget everything that I said. It will forget. Or you can say, do not share my data. There are settings in the device which you can do that. So yeah, so everything is with your consent. And there is nobody, trying to, snoop on you or, listen to information that they would rather not listen to.
Yeah. Okay. So how has this transition been from the Navy world to the naval world to the Alexa or the civilian world, like we call in the armed forces? Were you in for a surprise? Was it like, oh my God, I was so disciplined, and they're like, here they're so casual. They address you by your first name. They don't even say your rank. So
Yeah.
how was the transition there?
So, okay. So a mixed bag actually. So you see what happens is when you spend 20 years in the armed forces, and I joined as 18-year-old schoolboy. Yeah? So there is a certain amount of regimentation that comes in. So you speak in a certain way, you dress in a certain way, your vocabulary is something you are used to working with a certain kind of people. So to that extent, when you make that transition, here what I spoke about moving out of the comfort zone, this is exactly that.
Yes.
So you have a different set of people with different value systems, but it's not like they are inferior or they're different. That's all. And your ability to assimilate and integrate is a function of how you are able to accept. So it involves a certain amount of unlearning. So I should be okay with somebody calling me by first name as opposed to being sirred and saluted or whatever. So I'm okay with 19-year-olds calling me by first name now. So those are some of the unlearnings that you need to do consciously, and a lot of things that you need to, accept. So one trap, for example, where the Fauji's fall into is, we say that, when I was in the army, I did this, and when I was in the Navy, we did this. Honestly, the guy on the city street hasn't seen you operate, so he will not appreciate it entirely. He may admire you for it, but he may not fathom the entire thing. So therefore, it's impractical to keep going back to the past. So what you should focus on is what you are now. What is it that you are delivering now? What challenges you are facing now? How you are adding value now? And that is what will sort of help you, sync and gel with the so-called civilian population. But I think people are people ultimately everywhere, and as long as you
Yes,
recognize.
of course. Okay. Our Dean Academics is here. Sir, would you like to ask some questions? Or would you like to say a few words? Dean, sir?
Yeah. Sir, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Really.
Good afternoon to you.
Yes, sir. Johnson Matthew, Dean Academics for all the 3 schools. Really very happy that, sir, the last 45 minutes, your content in a long run, sir, it will instill the confidence, what direction these children have to follow. And really, this is what we were looking forward through this program. And we are really blessed, I must say. And I hope my children and teachers were inspired. Even at this age, I was inspired. Please, we will be in touch with you. And from my side, only one question, because I was so eager to join the armed forces. In fact, I was in NCC, both in the junior division as well as in the senior division army wing. Maybe because of my family circumstances, I could not make it to the armed forces. So finally, I landed with my teaching profession. But anyway, no regrets. Sir, kindly share with us some very interesting, adventurous moment, not in the war, but even in your duty, which really has shaped your personality, sir, during your journey or during your warship training. Any interesting event still in your memory, which really molded your, I must say, guts or confidence, braveness? Kindly share, sir.
No, thank you so much, Johnson, sir, first of all, for all those lovely words that you've said. I think it's always a pleasure, like I said, to talk to youngsters, and one is only trying to share the experience that one has garnered. So I'm going to jump into the question that you asked me. So a lot of it is already covered in the talk, but I want to talk about 2 or 3 specific instances. I want to dispel this notion that the guys who join the armed forces and the ladies who join the armed forces, they are people of steel and guts, and they have patriotism worn on their sleeves. While all of that is true, we are very normal human beings with normal abilities. The beauty or the secret of success of the armed forces lies in the training, the regimentation, the discipline, and the ethos that they instill. So some of what I spoke about, integrity, loyalty, character, honor, discipline, everything is what goes into shaping that individual. So they pick up schoolboys and schoolgirls from the college and schools, and they transform them into leaders. And that, to my mind, is hugely inspirational in its own way. I'll give you 2 very interesting examples. So there was this time where so the Indian Navy has this great exercise called Tropex, what we call a theater level exercise that we do February, March of every year, where the entire Indian Navy is broken down into a red force and a blue force, and we act like enemies with each other. And except for live weapon firing, we don't actually fire at each other, but practically we fight a war. So it's like a war game simulation on in real territory. Tactics and everything. So one such exercise, and part of that strategy is to keep your radars and your sonar and everything off so that nobody detects you, and you're maintaining absolute silence. And so we discovered that there was this Pakistani warship that had entered into this area where we were operating. And I was on board the destroyer Ranvijay, and immediately Ranvijay was dispatched, hey, go and look who's there and sort this guy out. And this was PNS Shah Jahan. Shah Jahan is a frigate, Pakistani naval frigate. So we went towards Shah Jahan. That is the first time that I, in my whole naval career, had come face to face with the enemy. Now that's a very special moment, because typically, unlike an army where you understand that you're operating on the borders and you get an opportunity to see the enemy face to face, In the Navy or in the Air Force, you're pretty much seeing him as a blip on the radar screen and mostly technology driven battles. So this was a case where we could see the ship, half a furlong away, and we could see the people moving around, and we had our helicopters shadowing him. So for good 13 days after that, first we, accosted him. We continuously trailed him. So we used to keep exchanging messages. We used to say good morning, good evening to each other. So from Mangalore, which is south of Goa, he took us right up to, off Karachi. He refueled and he came back all the way to the south of Sri Lanka. So we were there along this entire journey. So that's the first time you see the human side of the enemy. We always conventionally, the moment you think of Chinese or Pakistanis, we look at them as enemies, but you realize in those moments that there is another professional sitting on the other side who is doing his job for the country just as you are doing for yours. So there is a soldier to soldier, there is that mutual respect, and there is that professionalism which takes place. That is not to say that tomorrow, if my country orders me to go and fight, we will fight, and he will also fight. But the respect and the ethos of fighting, what we call dharma yuddh in Mahabharata, which says the doing the right thing, that is something that stayed with me, because as a young officer, I used to feel like this chap is the enemy and we should do this and that. But you realize that they are real people and they are as professional as you. So there is a matter of factness about this whole thing. So that's one example. The other example which I had was, we were sent for a humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operation after a cyclone hit Paradeep. And I was on a survey ship, and the harbor was completely choked because of the cyclone and boats. So we went and cleared the harbor. We were the first ship to enter. And the signs of, devastation and death we saw there over the next 1 week, and we helped in the rescue and rehabilitation. That is something that's really, really stayed with me. It was an opportunity for me to be able to, lift up dead bodies on my own hands and, help people recover. Those are opportunities that really, I couldn't eat for the next 4 or 5 days. So the point I'm making is, the service gives you a fantastic opportunity, not just to, expand your own horizons or develop your own skills, as it were, but it also helps you become a better person internally, so that you learn this element of mutual respect or sensitivity or empathy. And those are values which have stayed with me through my service career, sir. I hope that answers your question, sir.
Really, sir. We salute you. We salute you, sir. And thank you very much. And back to principal, please.
Thank you, sir. I think the students are too much in awe of you and out of words to ask you questions. Maybe if they have questions, they can reach out to you because you've shared your contact. So I'd just like to close and thank you very much for such a wonderful session. Sparing your precious time on a weekend for you, and last day of the week. We are working tomorrow, so it's not a weekend yet for us. For you, thank you very much, and look forward to having you again. Not in the Ignite Minds, but maybe some other occasion in our school. Thank you so much,
Sure.
Commander Raja.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Radha ma'am, and thank you to everybody in the faculty and staff and students. A fantastic opportunity and lovely to talk to you guys. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.